Okay, we're recording.
We're recording. Welcome. It is April 27th, 2021. Calling the meeting to order at 6:40 p.m. Tonight's meeting is to go over the internal audit report. As far as roll call, we have Connie, Camille, and myself are present. And visiting us is our internal auditor, Marianne, and Cleo from the district. So with that, I will turn it over to Marianne to review the internal audit report.
Okay, well, thank you for having me. I wanted to thank the business office, Alicia and Cleo and the rest of the staff for really working with us to get both of these reports done in such a short period of time. So, you guys did a great job helping us out, getting us all the information we needed. So as you remembered last meeting, we did decide to do 2 cycles. So I have the 2 cycles I want to go over. As you can see, both reports were very good reports. We had some minor suggestions or recommendations, but all in all, I thought the internal audits did, result in a positive report. So I'm going to talk about the procurement and the claims processing first. Do you all have a copy of the report, I'm assuming?
Do you want me to pull that up on the screen or?
I mean, you could if you want.
Okay.
If you could, I'm having trouble opening the file.
Yep. You're going to start with procurement, you said, right?
Right.
Let me just open that up. Okay. Can everybody see that?
Yep.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. So as we do with all our internal audit reports, we do document all the processes and the procedures that we have gotten through our interviews or observations. So essentially the first group or the first 11 pages of the report talk about the procurement overview. We talk a little bit about competitive bidding, the quotation process, the procurement process, cash disbursements, budget transfers, and also the claims auditor process. So this was really a compilation of, like I said, interviews, reviewing your policies, your procedures, and then in addition to documenting all the procedures, and what we like to do is whenever we do a cycle, to have this for the district to build off of. So if you do have anybody new that comes into the district that is getting involved in this purchasing or procurement cycle, this is a great tool for them to use as a procedure manual. And then you could build off of it based on all the cycles that we're doing. So this is something we like to do with all our internal audits. So it really is very detailed on all the procedures and the policies and everything the district is doing in the area of procurement and claims processing. So in addition to outlining all the procedures within the report, then we also do some testing and reviewing of your policies. So I wanted to jump to page 12 to go over really the policy, what we've done as far as the actual testing and also the reviews of any documents within the district and the procurement and claims processing. So the first procedure that we did do was we reviewed all the board policies related specifically to procurement and claims processing. And you did have all the required policies and procedures in place. So we did not have any exceptions with regards to your policies. We did also review the claims auditor reports. So we wanted to make sure that the claims auditor reports were provided timely to the board. And we verified that there was proper documentation and itemization was provided. We reviewed the making sure that the payments were for a legal purpose and the transaction was properly authorized prior to approving the invoice for payment. So based on our review of the claims auditor reports and what the claims auditor procedures were, we did not have any issues with the claims auditor and what the claims auditor has done. Then we'd like to look at your competitive bidding and quotes. So this is governed by general municipal law as well as your purchasing policy. depending on whether it's a purchase service or equipment, there's different thresholds that require bids. And then below the bid requirements, you should also have outlined in your purchasing policy what you are going to get written quotes on and what you're going to get verbal quotes on. So we did review your 15 vendors that were paid in excess of $5,000 in the current year to make sure that you were in alignment with General Municipal Law 103B and 103 and 104B, as well as the district policies. And you did have all the required bids and quotes in place based on the selection that we made for this year. Okay, then what we do is we looked at 45 cash disbursements from the warrants for all funds to make sure that the disbursements were in compliance with board policy. There was proper approvals, that there was mathematical accuracy on the invoices. There was appropriate documentation, including invoices and receipts. And we did have one finding in this area where we did review one disbursement for a vendor called 9 West. We noted that one disbursement was not paid in agreement. Wait, can you just scroll back up? Okay. Yep. In agreement with the approved contract. So what we do is we look at the approved contract, we look at what the disbursements are to make sure that they're in agreement with what's outlined in the contract. And in this case, the district did pay an overtime rate for labor worked, yet overtime rates are not noted in the agreement for the contract. We're not agreed upon within the contract. So we did discuss that with the district, and we noted that the disbursement related to an emergency renovation needed to comply with COVID-19 regulations before the district reopening, thus leading to weekend overtime work. So they had to come in during the weekend. So in this case, I would suggest getting maybe a board approval if you're going to change anything over and above what's outlined in the contracts to make sure that everybody is in agreement, because things do come up where there may be an emergency, especially with the COVID regulations. And it's obvious that they needed to get this done. And they had to come in on the weekend.
Mary, can I ask a question? Do we not
Sure.
have like you know how sometimes entities will have like emergency procedures where they're allowed to, in the event of an emergency, do whatever they have to do, but then they subsequently go back and get the approval so everybody knows that it happened. And
Right.
obviously that should be used few and far between, but at least then you're still complying with some level of a policy.
Right. So if they were not able to get board approval before it was done, then I would definitely recommend getting it done afterwards. So there is documentation that, there was some sort of an approval, and, timing wise, maybe there wasn't a board meeting that they could get the approval done. So we've seen that where that's better than no approval. So, that would be a good procedure to have in place, that if there is anything in an emergency, there are some circumstances also with bidding and quotes where maybe they didn't go out for a bid because it was some sort of an emergency, a boiler blew up or whatever, the case may be. And you can't just say, I'm going to wait, to go through all the proper purchasing procedures because it's, a health and safety issue. So in those circumstances, we always say, documented in the board minutes that, there was approval. And this would be really in the same lines, I would say, as something along, the purchasing after the fact approvals. So it was an outlier. It was, the only one out of all the disbursements that we reviewed. But we always want to make sure that the contract is in line with what the district is paying. So this was definitely not, and there was a reason behind it, but I think it's just a matter of documenting why and having it formally documented somewhere. Okay, any questions on that? So then in addition to looking at the cash disbursements, we also look at your cell phones and making sure that there's proper usage. So we looked at 4 monthly payments related to the district's cell phone bills to verify that usage, it was for business purpose and within the limits, and there was no exceptions in that area. Credit cards, same thing. We looked at 5 vendors and related to district credit cards, and to make sure there was proper usage. There was no issues in that area. We also looked at your 1099 compliance to make sure that any vendors paid in excess of $600 in the calendar year. If they were required to get a 1099, making sure that there was a W-9 form on file, as well as there was a 1099 issued. And we did not have any issues with the vendors that we selected. The next area we did, we did a vendor, master vendor file match with the employee file match to make sure that there's no conflicts of interest. And then we did not have any conflicts of interest with regards to that matching. Then we like to look at your budget transfers. So we looked at a sample of 7 budget transfers to make sure that it was properly approved, whether, it's really based on board policy and whether it requires board approval versus an administrator approval. We wanted to make sure that there was documentation to support the budget transfer, that the budget transfer was coded properly to the general ledger, and also that there was no budget transfers made into non-contingent codes or between non-contingent codes, which is not permissible. So we didn't have any exceptions per se, but we did note that there was some confusion, or the budget transfer policy is very vague, that it was, it wasn't as clear as it could be. So normally what we see is the budget transfer policy will say board approval is needed for transfers in total over $25,000 as opposed to $25,000 per line item. Because we did have a budget transfer that was broken down into, say, 5 or 6 different codes. They were coming from those codes going into the same code, but since it was broken down, it was 24,000, 24,000, 5,000, 6,000. So line by line, it was under the 25,000, but the code that it was going into, if you added up all those numbers, it was 57,000. So it wasn't clear based on the board policy what was expected. So I think it should be clear whether it's the total amount or if it's a line by line item on what requires board approval.
And the intention, of course, is cumulative transfers. So
The what?
the intention, of course, is that the policy should be based on cumulative budget transfers to that line.
Right. So that should
So
be
for sure.
outlined in the budget policy, because then you don't want to make sure that there's, it could potentially circumvent that $25,000 threshold, and then the board wouldn't see those budget transfers. But Dan, you get the budget transfers after the fact, don't you? If the administration approves it. But
Correct.
Yeah, I think just what it should be clear what the board should receive prior to any budget transfers being done. So if it is cumulative, it should specifically say that.
Okay. It's easy enough. We should just modify the policy.
Yeah, okay. And that was it. So really, there was not a lot of major issues, a couple of minor things that should be able to be corrected. And then basically what happens now is the district has to do a corrective action plan for those 2 items to send to the state. And it gets uploaded to the state portal. And then the corrective action plan should be, I don't know if you guys have a corrective action plan prepared.
I was going to say, before we go to the next audit report, can we look at the corrective action, please?
Yes, let me pull that up.
Okay, so you do, I haven't seen that, so.
I have that.
No, doesn't matter. She's not going down anymore.
Let me just change the screen.
It says May 6th to, oh, because is that your board meeting date? I was going to say.
Yes.
May 6th.
Oh, sorry. So that's for capital,
Mhm.
which we haven't done yet. Here's the response for the procurement and claims processing. So I think we didn't write up a corrective action because it said there was no findings. It was just a recommendation. Is that correct, Marianne? Or are you looking for?
Well, I think the first one we talked about, that was with the overtime rates, right? Are not
Right.
noted in the contract. And then it says all bid quotes obtained from, provide a clear timeline for the project and specifications will include the clause timeframe for completion of work is final. Compensation will not be given for work performed after hours in order to adhere to timeline. So basically you're saying that you're not going to allow working on
Right, like,
weekends or,
or no, we're basically saying, here's the time frame for completion of work, right? And if the contractors find themselves having to go beyond that time frame, right, we're not going to compensate them with that overtime rate,
and you're going to put that in the contracts.
right? Well, it's going to go even into the bid information as well.
Okay.
That they're going to have to provide a clear timeline for the completion.
Mhm.
And if they don't meet that timeline, it's not going to cost the district additional monies for that.
Right. I mean, I would put something in about the budget transfer policy. We didn't have any findings per se, but
Okay.
I think it's just that the budget transfer policy just needs to be
So,
more specific and clear.
so Marianne, if I can, if you don't mind, if I can just push back a little
Sure.
bit. If it's
Go ahead.
if it's a finding, for sure, I want it in this response. As a recommendation, we're going to change the policy. I mean, just to be clear, but does
Mhm.
it need to be in the corrective action report? Because this gets filed
Right.
with the state, right?
Right,
Right.
right.
I mean, it's under the findings section, so I'm assuming that it should go in the corrective action plan.
Because we've had, I believe, recommendations in the past, and we obviously take them seriously and respond accordingly, but we haven't put them in the corrective action plan, corrective action response.
Yeah, I think with the risk assessment reports, you don't have to do a corrective action plan. So if we had recommendations in the risk assessment, the state does not want to get a corrective action plan for those reports.
Okay.
But for any cycle reports, that's where they want to get a corrective action plan.
Okay.
So,
That's fine. So I mean, clear then, if you don't mind, can you add, let's just make sure it's clear. It's a recommendation to modify the policy to provide more explicit language on budget transfers will be, evaluated on a cumulative basis during a budget year.
As the corrective action. Okay. Budget transfer policy. To include cumulative basis of $25,000
for board approval.
for BOE approval. Okay, so we can correct that on the letter. Okay. Got it.
Anything else on this report?
No.
Okay.
Overall, it's a clean report, so thank you.
Yeah, no, they did, it was very good. And this one's even getting better. See, this is the bad one compared to this one. So,
When in doubt,
which is pretty
hit me
good.
with the worst stuff and
So now it's clean sailing.
Good strategy.
Okay, so now the second cycle that we did an in-depth review on was capital projects. And here we basically reviewed your policies. We did interviews, same as what we did with the other cycle. And we looked at the capital projects overview. We also looked at your 5-year capital facilities plan, how you establish a capital project, contract formation, capital project administration. We looked at your change order procedures, as well as contract closeout procedures. We also looked at your filing of your final building capital project reports. So this is really all outlined in the first 12 pages. And like I said, this is also another document you can incorporate in a procedure manual within the district. So if anybody is getting involved with capital projects, it is a nice outline on the procedures and you could cross-train people. So there's a lot of good information on here based on all the interviews that we did. Then I'm going to just go to page 13, which is where we give you all the procedures, the specific procedures that we did as far as reviewing policies. We did review your policies with your board policies. We reviewed the actual procedures that you do have in place and surrounding any internal controls with regards to the capital projects. And that was based on pretty much interviews, and we did some walkthroughs of the processes, and you did have all the policies in place that you're required to have, and we didn't have any other recommendations as far as the procedures. We reviewed your 5-year capital facilities plan, which all districts are required to have, to make sure that there was evidence of proper filing and verification that the plan was current and had all the required information that you need to have in the plan. And everything worked out, that everything was in the plan that was required to be, and it was filed in a timely manner. Procedure to perform, we looked at your building inventory listing from the district and verified that each building listed in the building inventory had a CO, a current CO, and we didn't have any problems with that. Then we looked at your fire and lockdown drills. So districts are required to have drills, and it's very specific. There's guidelines that the state provides that you have to have them during certain increments during the year. So for instance, you're required to have one within the first 7 days of the school year. So we look at the criteria that the state has for fire drills and lockdown drills to make sure that you are in accordance with that education law and you did have all the proper drills that you were required to have in the time frame that you're required to have. Then we looked at specific expenditures. Here we did some testing. We looked at your cash, about 30 cash disbursements from the capital asset expenditure reports, making sure that the payment application was approved for payment by the architect, the construction manager, that there was appropriate district personnel and the district's claims auditor there was proper approvals. The original contract amount and rates for labor and materials that agreed to the bid documentation submitted by the contractor, that the district had board approval of the contract on file, which specified the work that was performed in accordance with the architect's specifications. Also the timeline to complete the work, the insurance requirements, all that is required to be in the contract. So we did review that. We made sure that there was a current certificate of insurance for the contractor. We also looked at the expenditure was charged to the proper projects, making sure that you're tracking your capital projects, you're coding the expenditures properly to each of the projects. And also we looked at your total change orders per the AIA invoice, and it agreed to the total change orders per the district provided change order listing. So all in all, we looked at all these disbursements and we did not have any issues. You were complying with all of the above. Then we looked at change order compliance. So we obtained a sample of 5 change orders from a listing of change orders. We made sure that the change order was approved or accepted by the board according to the board policy. The change order form was reviewed and approved by the architect, construction manager, the contractor, Elisa, and or the superintendent according to board policy. The total approved change orders for the contract did not exceed 5% of the original contract amount. So you have to make sure of that they're not trying to circumvent the bidding process by underbidding. And then you're having all these change orders after the fact. So we made sure that the change orders did not exceed 5% of the original contract amount. The district did not issue multiple small change orders to the same contractor to circumvent the approval process, which is something we review to make sure that there aren't, cumulative small change orders so that they don't have to go and get board approval. So all in all that checked out. We did not have any exceptions with regards to change order compliance. Then on page 15, we looked at your contract administration. So what we did was we got the contract with the district's architect and we verified that the contract was signed by the architect and the board president. The contract was current. The contract specified the following and it listed all these requirements that you're supposed to have in the contracts, and everything was properly included in the contract. We also did the same with the construction manager and verified that specific responsibilities were outlined with regards to what the construction manager should be doing as far as monitoring, documenting, that they're working in conjunction with the architect, that they inspect materials delivered to the job, they provide progress reports, and they attend project meetings. So all in all, the construction manager was doing all the required documentation and oversight based on our review. Then we look at your final building project report. So this is the reports that you file once a project is complete. Then you file your final expenditure reports. So we obtained, the state does have a listing of project status reports. It's called the SA 777 report to make sure that the final building project reports were filed timely. And this is important because there were districts that did not file their final project reports timely, and they had building aid taken back from the state. So it is important to monitor that. So we did go through that listing and your projects had been filed timely. So there was no problem with that. So this report, we actually had no findings, no recommendations. It was a really, really good report, and the controls were in place, and kudos to the district for doing a great job really with both reports. I mean, both reports really turned out very well. So I always like when I have good news at a district. So this was definitely a good news night. And, I think everybody really wants to do the right thing in your district, and they have a positive attitude. And whenever we bring any recommendations to them, they want to implement or discuss. So, they worked really well with us.
Terrific. And Cleo, I see, right, even though there's no findings, we still put a response that says there's no findings. So pretty straightforward.
Right, exactly.
It's a beautiful thing.
Right.
That's a good thing.
Otherwise, the
Yeah.
state will say, you didn't give us your corrective action plan. So even if it
Right.
says there's no corrective action, but that's, better to have too much than too little.
Absolutely. Fantastic. I thought it was a great overview. Appreciate you walking us through it. Did anybody have any questions for Mary Ann? I'll take that as no.
No?
Okay. So Mary Ann, if you don't mind, can we impose on you to actually come to the board meeting for a few minutes and go over the reports with the board? I know that everybody appreciates your narrative that goes on top of this.
I'm actually going to be traveling that day because I think it's on a Thursday, right? It's the Thursday before Mother's Day.
Yep.
May 6th, yes.
Okay.
Yeah,
It's
I
fine.
know that if I had known before, I would have made sure that I wasn't traveling at that time. So
The good news is, as you know, as you know, the reports are clean, so it's easy enough to walk through. I'll tell them if anybody has any questions, we can pull you into a meeting after the board
sure,
meeting, but
yeah, not a problem.
If anything, it'll be for clarification. It won't be because they disagree with the report. So,
Right.
so perfect.
Okay.
We do have the recording as well.
Very
Also.
good. Okay.
Okay.
So then, with that, if we can conduct a little bit of business, just looking at the agenda, first of all, if I can get on acceptance of minutes, can I get a motion to accept our last meeting minutes?
I can motion. So don't you mean to say, I'm sorry, I motion to accept the minutes from last meeting.
Great. Connie, can I get a second?
I second.
Great. Resolved that the minutes from the January 26, 2021 meeting be accepted as prepared. Each audit committee member having received a copy. Motion carried by all. All right. Next up
Yep.
was the R.S. Abrams presentation, discussion of the audit report and observations on internal controls related to capital projects and procurement and claims processing. So the next item for motioning is the acceptance of the audit report related to capital projects.
We'll make a motion for that, to accept the capital projects report.
Perfect. And Camille, can I get a second?
I second.
Perfect. Whereas the audit committee has met with Marion Van Dyne, CPA of R.S. Abrams and Company LLP, to review the draft internal audit report on the internal controls related to the capital projects for the period ending February 28, 2021. Each member having received a copy. Resolved that the audit committee accepts the internal audit report related to capital projects and recommends that the Board of Education accept the internal audit report at the May 6, 2021 Board of Education meeting. Motion to accept carried by all. All right, next up is the review of the district's corrective action plan in response to the internal auditor's report. Can I get a motion?
Do we need to say as amended, right? Isn't Cleo gonna update it?
So I'm looking at this one. The first one that we're actually going to talk about, Camille, is the capital projects report, which I believe was not the one that we're amending, correct?
Correct.
We're going to actually approve them individually, so it'll be the next one.
All right, well then I'll motion to approve the corrective action plan for the capital projects.
If I get a
Oh,
second.
yeah, yes, I second. I was on mute, sorry.
No worries, thank you. Whereas the audit committee has reviewed the corrective action plan developed by the district in response to the internal audit report related to capital projects. Resolved that the audit committee accepts the corrective action plan related to capital projects and recommends the Board of Education accept the corrective action plan at the May 6, 2021 Board of Education meeting. Motion to accept carried by all.
Thank you.
All right, next up, is everybody hanging in there as we go through all these? Next one is the acceptance of the audit report related to procurement and claims processing. This is the report, not the corrective action plan. So can I get a motion?
Yes, I have a motion for that.
And I can second it.
Thank you both. Whereas the audit committee has met with Marianne Van Dyne, CPA of R.S. Abrams and Company, LLP, to review the draft internal audit report on the internal controls relating to procurement and claims processing for the period July 1, 2020 through February 28, 2021. Each member having received a copy. Resolved that the audit committee accepts the internal audit report related to procurement and claims processing and recommends that the Board of Education accept the internal audit report at the May 6th, 2021 Board of Education meeting. Motion to accept carried by all.
Thank you.
All right. All right. Last item of business is to review the district's amended corrective action plan in response to the internal auditor's report. Get a motion.
I will motion that. It's Connie.
Thank you, Connie.
I can second it.
And this will, while we haven't seen the actual written form of it, it will reflect the corrective action to modify the Board of Education policy on budget transfers, as we've discussed. Cleo, if I can ask, of course, that we get a revised copy of the corrective action plan circulated to the audit committee members prior to the May 6th meeting. This way, if anybody has any edits, we can further refine it.
Okay. Yes.
And if everybody's okay with that approach, whereas the audit committee has reviewed the corrective action plan as amended, developed by the district in response to the internal audit report related to procurement and claims processing. Resolved that the audit committee accepts the corrective action plan as amended to procurement and claims processing and recommends that the Board of Education accept the corrective action plan at the May 6th, 2021 Board of Education meeting. Motion to accept carried by all.
Thank you.
All right. And then last up, can I get a motion to adjourn our meeting? We do have some topic to discuss, but we can, well, actually, I think we can, because we have another item, we're going to talk about expiring terms, Cleo.
Right. We're going to talk about expiring terms and open finance council seats as well.
Okay.
Those are on the agenda.
So Marianne, I think we're good. If you want to
Okay,
roll off, I appreciate all
All
the hard
right.
work and appreciate the great overview.
okay, thank you. Good
Thank-
night to
Thanks,
all.
Marianne.
Night.
Have a good night.
seeing
Thank you so much.
All right, bye-bye.
Bye.
So Cleo, I think you said Mary's seat is coming up.
Yes, that's what Michelle had said to me, that Mary Hartnett's seat is coming up.
I had sent her a note. I didn't get a response back yet. I just sent it yesterday, so we can just follow.
you're
up there. Presumably she will renew her seat, but I want to make sure she has an option to weigh in before we just decide for her.
Okay.
That's the only seat that's expiring, right?
Yes, that's the only one that,
Okay.
yeah, Michelle said it was just the one seat. So, for finance council seats though, I'm just trying to think. Is that 2 seats?
So it's actually an interesting situation. So we have one
'Cause we,
active finance council member, and that's Tom.
Mhm.
We had brought on boarded a few other finance council members whom I don't think they've officially resigned their positions, but they have not obviously spent some time since they've joined the meeting. Cleo, so I think we should reach out to them and get confirmation with them that they're resigning their positions.
okay,
And then if you can confirm, I don't know if you know offhand, Cleo, the finance council was meant to be, it was created a while ago for a different purpose. We had an individual that could not sit on the audit committee for specific reasons, but he could sit on the finance council. That individual has since left, but we then repurposed the council to be able to broaden the participation from members in the community on a variety of topics, and also gives us an opportunity, should an audit committee seat open up, it's easier for us to hopefully recruit for the finance council seats. So I don't know if there's a fixed number of finance council seats that we have.
I could certainly find that out.
Okay.
I'm not sure as well.
But I would ask Camille and Connie, I mean, first and foremost, obviously, if you know anybody in the community that might be interested in joining finance council, I think it would be a terrific opportunity. Obviously, you're all very familiar with it. So if you know anybody, please feel free to reach out. But then Cleo, we should talk about how we market it. I think last time we put it in a couple of the newsletters.
Okay,
You could probably pull up the Michelle probably has the past posting that we included. All right, we ask for resumes and individuals with relevant backgrounds.
I think when I joined the finance committee, I received an email from the school district. I didn't see it in the,
Yeah,
like in a bulletin, like a school bulletin.
yeah, Connie, we had posted it, and then I believe we got your name from somebody, so we reached out to you directly.
Oh, that's okay.
But it makes sense, Cleo. We can, if you want to get a copy of what we had posted last time and send it to me, I'm sure it's fine. But if we have to make any edits to it, we can get it added to one of the upcoming newsletters.
okay. Okay. Because we have those people until the end of this year. So we can put it into place for July. All right, so we're gonna look at the fixed number of seats. We're gonna market the positions to relevant backgrounds. I'm gonna pass along a copy of the last posting that was made to the finance committee. Do you want it just finance or finance and audit? Think anybody will be moving from one to the other or joining both?
So we're not, the challenge that we have, well, not to be exclusionary on audit, because of the business nature of audit, that if audit became too large, it becomes difficult to hold a quorum. So it's easier to keep it, the committee to the
Small.
finite. Our charter says, I believe, 5 members is required. We've decided not to expand the number of audit committee members. And then we've expanded finance council, right? Because this way we can have as many council members as we'd like. And it doesn't affect quorum because they aren't voting members for any business actions.
Okay. Okay,
But if you get it, send it to me, I'll edit it and we can get it in an upcoming post. It's pretty straightforward.
so I think that's everything then.
Terrific. All right, Connie, Camille, anything else?
No.
No, I'm good. It was a
Thank you.
nice,
It was a
quick
good,
meeting.
yeah.
Great meeting.
Thank you.
For your nice
Very
work.
good one.
Thank you. Thank you so much for your time this evening. It's deeply appreciated, and I will follow up with those items.
All right, and with that, can I get a motion to adjourn tonight's meeting at 7:20 p.m.?
A motion
will
to-
motion.
Oh.
Go ahead, Connie, you can motion, I'll second. I'm
Okay,
happy
I
to
motion
second
to
that.
end the meeting. I've always wanted to say that.
Well, thank you, everybody. Appreciate your time tonight and have a wonderful evening.
You
All
too.
right, it's carried by all.
Good night.
Thank
Bye
you.
now.
Have a good night. Bye-bye.